If you're picking Brian Ortega over Diego Lopez this weekend, then you genuinely have no clue about MMA because Diego Lopez is going to make light work of Ortega, and I'm picking him via first round sub, and it all starts off with Diego Lopez's clean pocket boxing. Recently, when his opponents get close to him, in any circumstance, he is clipping them with uppercuts, hooks, and all that. You can see it here. As soon as Sadiq Youssef engages, he's down immediately. 2 knockdowns in that fight, in the Pat Sabatini fight as well. As soon as they get close to each other in range, Diego Lopez is landing. Even in the Mobstar fight, he extends his hooks and he wobbles him for a bit there too. And, one flaw in Ortega you can say about him recently, not only has he been very injury prone, but also look at the Yair Rodriguez fight. In the Yair Rodriguez fight, Ortega got dropped twice with a hook, the same style of hook that Diego Lopez throws, and he got dropped by him twice. And Yair Rodriguez, whilst, he has had some knockdowns and very significant moments in his career, they've all come from his kicks, not from his punches. And Ortega, whilst we thought a lot about his chin, I think it got cracked a lot in, the Volk fight and stuff. But, Yair Rodriguez, instead of capitalizing on, Ortega's, being in a hurt kind of state, he goes for grappling against, a very credible, highly credible, jiu-jitsu black belt. I don't know why he did that. This was right after Ortega failed his single leg and clinched up, and instead of disengaging to hurt Ortega, he went for some grappling. But it is what it is. So yeah, as I was saying, Volk cracked his chin a bunch. We know the Holloway fight too, and these are some inside shots. This overhand, it's in mid-range, and I think Diego Lopez's reach will help him land these types of shots when he needs to after he gets Ortega hurt and Ortega stumbling around the cage. And yeah, he could also mix in some elbows as well. He hasn't thrown many in his UFC career, but I'm sure he might want to implement it too if he gets Ortega up on the fence and stuff. But, one other thing. Looking at this Holloway fight, this is a sequence I'm banking on in combination with the Yair Rodriguez one, where I'm going to play it again, where, I'm going to see Diego Lopez throwing these very massive hook shots and landing cleaner than Holloway. This was a less in-prime version of Holloway, a younger, I guess you can say weaker version, because we can see the lightweight one is way stronger and way more refined than this version of Holloway. And I'm going to see, we're going to see the same thing happen. In my opinion, he's going to be hurting him. Ortega's going to drop. And like he did with Yair, his neck is going to be there. And we're going to see Diego Lopez pounce on some kind of guillotine to Darce. And I said any submission. I don't know what's going to happen submission-wise, but I think Ortega's going to get way too hurt, and he's going to give up some kind of choke to Diego Lopez. So, what if I'm wrong? What if the first round submission doesn't work? Maybe Diego Lopez hurts Brian Ortega, but Ortega survives and gets on some single leg and they disengage and nothing else happens. Well, we then have to go to the grappling. What's the worry there? Do we have to be worried at all? And I don't think so. Because, there's a chance, something happens with, I think the guy's name was Nate Richardson or something like that. This was Diego Lopez's loss after Joanderson Brito. He survived Diego Lopez's submission attempts, and he hit him with some clean shots on the feet as well. And we know that Diego Lopez often struggles when his opponents put him on in the bottom of the guard, and he, doesn't work a lot from there and often just gets caught there seeking submissions, but instead eating some ground and pound shots. But one thing I can tell you is if this will happen only if Diego Lopez fails his submission attempt. Because if it relies on Brian Ortega, his takedown accuracy, as you can see, is only 27%. 27%. So there's nothing to worry about whatsoever when it comes to Brian Ortega's offensive wrestling to get Diego Lopez down. So Diego can keep this on the feet. But, Ortega has horrible striking defense, but he does have some decent boxing. I know he got clipped by Yair, and I'm making a point out of it, but he has decent boxing. He was clipping Volk in the 5th round of their fight, and I actually gave him that 5th round after, getting 10-8 in the 3rd and stuff. But, yeah, it's nothing to be impressed by when it comes to Brian Ortega's offensive grappling. So I don't think it'll happen unless Diego Lopez slips up on a guillotine, which I don't think he'll go on Ortega unless, the chance is right there. I think he's going to go to like a guillotine darce and like chain them rather than just jumping a pure guillotine or something like that. So, yeah. And look, here's an example. I know this is on Holloway defending it very impressively, but come on. You have his legs, and you should be able to do something with him here. But, doesn't succeed at all whatsoever. Yeah, pretty fucking weak from Low T City. So, moving on. And also the submission attempts of Ortega. A lot of them, pretty much every submission attempt, apart from the Yair one, has come from a sequence on the feet rather than just pure grappling on the ground. The Brandao fight, he did chain a darce from the feet. Like, Brandao shot for a takedown, and then he got a darce, and then transitioned into a triangle. I guess if you don't want to count that one, then don't. But against his debut, it was a standing rear naked choke. Swanson was a standing guillotine. And Renato Moicano shot for the takedown, a deep takedown, and chucked his neck right in there, and Ortega tapped him. So, nothing to be worried about there. I'd rather trust a guy in Lopez who can grapple on the ground and throw out like a whole variety of submission attempts like he did against Movsar and all his other opponents as well. We can see in that fight alone, and this isn't like he attempted some of these multiple times. We got an armbar, a heel hook attempt in the bottom left, in the middle, a straight a leg lock, and a triangle, and then a kimura as well on the bottom right. So I trust that over I guess Ortega's recent, not recent, but overall seeking of doing submissions on the feet and stuff. I know he's skilled on the ground. He showed it against Yair, but it's Yair Rodriguez. He has 0 ground game. You looking over that fight, as I did, he passed his guard so easily. Yair Rodriguez gave his back so easily, whilst Diego Lopez is going to be scrambling around. And with Ortega's injuries and surgeries and whatnot, you kind of got to factor in that, Diego Lopez is the way fresher kind of guy physically. And, speaking of being fresher, let's go to some of, I guess, the outside the technique parts. Diego Lopez is always in fight shape. He just stopped filming Tough, and you can count on the UFC. I can guarantee you that the UFC went to Diego Lopez first because they knew this guy would be a company man and say yes. And he was, I'm guessing, a little bit more aware of the fight before Ortega. Whilst, Ortega is at, weddings with another, I guess, Latina gal, having fun, putting tape over his mouth. Come on. This is some bullshit right here. Come on. I don't get the tape over the mouth bit. And, this is his response to, his assessment on the fight against Diego Lopez. Just hold on. Let me see if the audio's there.
And how do you see the fight playing out with Diego on Saturday?
I feel like it's going to be a great fight. He's a young, hungry lion. I've been here already for a bit at the the top 3, so it's it's gonna be who, like when you watch National Geographic and you see the the young lion that's in the older lion. That's the fight we're gonna get.
Thank you.
But when we see an old and young lion fight, normally the young lion wins. Young lion wins. We saw that in what? Lion King, the guy overthrew him or something. I think that was. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I'm gonna go with the more logical. I'm not counting on the old lion to show up. Let's just say that the old lion ain't showing up for this fight, and Diego Lopez is gonna make light work of Ortega. Sure, Ortega's boxing is decent, and he could survive some submission attempts early and maybe drag it on to a decision. But even then, I'd still ride with Diego. It's 3 rounds only, so I'm not too worried about maybe Diego Lopez gassing out a little bit after chucking around 50 submission attempts early on if they get on the ground, or wailing hooks on Ortega and Ortega being able to survive them. But I'm going with the scenario of Ortega getting dropped early like he did against Yair, but instead of Yair going for a judo toss, I'm going to go with Diego Lopez pouncing on some chokes and sequencing it to like a Darce or something, and getting a first round submission on Ortega early and easy. And yeah, as always,
I'm glad you asked.
peace out.